Okay, so have you ever really thought about how strong a lion is?
Oh, yeah. Like how powerful they are.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about an animal that can weigh over 500 pounds with teeth longer than your thumb,
That's incredible.
and their bite force is insane. They can totally crush bones, and they can also run like 50 miles per hour, jump over a small car, and hear you coming from a mile away.
That's intense.
And their roar is like this deep, chest-rattling sound that can travel for miles. Have you ever been close enough to really hear one?
I can't say I have. That's pretty wild, though.
It is, and that image of raw power that a lion represents, it actually connects to this deeper understanding of the Easter story and Jesus, who is often called the Lion of Judah.
Interesting because we usually see these gentler, more peaceful images associated with Easter.
Exactly, and that's what we are going to be diving into today with Stephen Johnson's presentation, When the King Goes Out to War, Shock and Awe from the Freedom Outpost.
So we are going to explore this idea of God not just as a rescuer, but as a warrior.
Right, and what that means for our understanding of faith in the Easter narrative.
Okay, so this is interesting because it brings up a really important point.
Hmm.
You know how we tend to have these softer, more tame images of Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, Dorothy Sayers, she actually said that it was the people who opposed Christ who truly understood how powerful and disruptive he was.
Mm.
She said that later generations are the ones who kind of muffled up that shattering personality, basically turning the Lion of Judah into something safe and manageable.
That's a really thought-provoking idea, especially when we look at the Exodus story.
Definitely.
I mean, think about the plagues. They were way more than just annoying. They started out kind of irritating, but then they became these huge waves of destruction, like disease and darkness, and finally death.
Right, and it wasn't just about freeing the Israelites. It was about God showing his power and judging the gods of Egypt.
Exactly. And the Israelites even took all this plunder with them when they left. It was a total victory.
And you see this imagery of power again when you look at the prophecy about Judah in
Mm.
Genesis 49 and next. He is described as a lion, fierce and dominant, with his paw on the neck of his enemies. It even asks, like a lion, he crouches and lies down like a lioness who dares to rouse him.
So Judah represents this inherent power and strength, and it's really interesting that the first month in the biblical calendar is connected to Judah.
That makes sense.
Right. And what's really cool is that the story doesn't end with the Israelites just peacefully leaving Egypt.
Oh, right.
God tells Moses to have them camp by the sea, knowing that Pharaoh would chase after them.
So it wasn't just about escaping. It was about something more.
Exactly. God says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord.
Wow, so there was a purpose behind it.
Yeah, it was about showing his power and who he really was.
But what about the Israelites? I mean, they must have been terrified when Pharaoh's army showed up.
Oh, they were. And they basically said to Moses, were there no decent burial places in Egypt that you had to bring us out here to die in the desert? It's like they were being pretty sarcastic.
Wow, so even after seeing all these miracles, they still doubted.
It's understandable, though, right? I mean, wouldn't you be scared?
Yeah, probably. But God's response is so important. He says to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward."
It's like he was saying, stop being afraid, just move.
Yeah, there's this powerful contrast between their fear and God's command to act.
And then comes the Red Sea moment.
Right. That's just incredible.
I know, it's hard to even imagine the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Not a single one of Pharaoh's army survived.
So the Israelites saw God's power firsthand.
Yes, and it says they feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. It was a moment of pure awe and faith.
And then they break out into song led by Moses and Miriam.
Yeah, and a key part of that song is the Lord is a man of war, or a warrior. It really changes how we think about God.
Right. He's not just saving them passively, he's fighting for them.
Exactly. And this theme of God as a warrior continues in the book of Joshua.
Oh, right.
Before the Battle of Jericho, Joshua meets the commander of the Lord's army. But instead of acting like a military leader meeting an ally, he falls face down on the ground in worship.
Wow.
Yeah, and the commander tells him to remove his sandal because the ground is holy. It really emphasizes the presence of God.
That's powerful.
And then the strategy for taking Jericho is so strange. They march around the city in silence for days, and then on the last day they shout and the walls just collapse.
Wow, it was a complete reliance on God's power.
Totally, and the city is completely destroyed. It really shows how decisive God's actions are.
And then after they cross the Jordan River, they perform circumcision.
Yeah, Stephen Johnson sees this as removing the reproach of Egypt.
What does that mean?
Well, he believes that this reproach was a consequence of their disobedience back when they were slaves in Egypt.
Okay, so taking Jericho was another way for God to defeat their enemies and restore his honor.
Exactly. And if you think about it, there are some parallels to Jesus's entry into Jerusalem.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, he arrives humbly on a donkey, but then he goes straight into the temple and starts overturning tables and driving out the merchants.
Right, he's not afraid to use force.
It's a very different image from the gentle one we often have.
It is, and it makes you think about what happened between Jesus' crucifixion and his resurrection.
You mean that time period that's not talked about as much?
Yeah, the Apostles' Creed says he descended into hell.
I've always wondered what that meant.
It's definitely open to interpretation, but Stephen Johnson points to some verses in the Bible that offer some clues.
Like which ones?
Well, there's Ephesians 4.9, which talks about Jesus descending to the lower parts of the earth, and 1 Peter 3.18-20, which says that he proclaimed his victory to the spirits in prison.
Okay, so there was some kind of spiritual battle going on.
Right, and Colossians 2.15 says that he disarmed the spiritual authorities, and in Revelation 1.8, Jesus himself says, I have the keys of Hades and of death.
So the idea is that during this time, Jesus wasn't just passively waiting, he was actively fighting and defeating death itself.
Yeah, and that's the ultimate shock and awe. It's the victory over death that changes everything.
And then when Jesus returns in Revelation 19, he's not portrayed as a suffering servant anymore.
Right, he's coming back as a warrior.
Yeah, he's on a white horse with a sword clothed in blood. He's called faithful and true, and he's coming to judge and wage war.
Wow. So it's a very different image of Jesus than we typically see.
It is, and Stephen Johnson ends his presentation with a really powerful challenge. He doesn't want us to just understand God as the lion intellectually.
What does he mean?
He wants us to actually experience God's power personally, to hear his roar, so to speak, and to really know him.
So it's more than just head knowledge.
Exactly. It's about having a real encounter with the Lion of Judah.
So to sum it all up, this time of year that we associate with Passover and Easter is really about the king going out to war and displaying incredible power.
And those who follow this king, they carry some of that strength and determination within them.
It makes you think about whether we've really grasped how powerful God truly is.
Right, we tend to focus on his gentleness and love, but there's this whole other side to him.
And it makes you wonder what it truly means to be marked with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, as Johnson puts it.
It's definitely something to think about.
So here's a final thought for you. Is there any part of your understanding of God where you've become too casual, or maybe you've lost some of that awe and reverence?
That's a good question.
This deep dive challenges us to really see God as he is the lion arising in springtime going out to war.
Powerful image.